Because the Lord's main goal is relationship with you, relationship with me. Like me looking more like Jesus because I spend more time with him. And then other people around me being affected by that and coming to know him, right?
Well, hey, welcome in everybody to With Him podcast. And I am Miraz, and I'm here with my co host, Dr. J. And we have an amazing guest with us today. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. J introduce her because I think he's known her for a little while. So I'll let him tell you guys.
Yep. This is my wife, Jess Moore. Been married 20 years this year. 20 and a half now. It's halfway through the year.
Yeah.
So 20 and a half years. It's been great. It's been awesome. And I'm pumped to have Jess on the podcast.
Nice.
Talk a little bit about her and how she's partnered with the Lord. So it's going to be awesome.
All right. Absolutely. Well, Jess, tell us a little bit about what you do, but I don't want to just stay right there. I want to actually kind of come back to that, but tell us about what you do.
So I'm a licensed therapist, and I've worked in all kinds of different settings for, I think I calculated 21 years.
Ooh, for a little bit.
Yesterday. And so I started, we had Bailey, or shortly before we had Bailey, I started like part-time at a church. And then we had Bailey, and that worked really great because Jamie was working full-time at a church, and so I would watch Bailey when she was tiny, and then Jamie would come home, and then I would go do some like night sessions or like on the weekends.
So you're saying that at this church there was a counseling program
Ministry.
at this church, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really like a big part of the church. We were in Dallas Fort Worth at the time, but so that was great. And then I started with a company where we did in-home therapy, and it was really intense, like 3 times a week. Family therapy, and that was awesome. And it was in Dallas County, so all over like Dallas County. And then stayed with that company, Youth Villages, for 13 years, and did all kinds of different stuff. Worked in residential when we moved to Memphis, boys lockdown facility.
Damn.
And I got some stories on that one if anybody ever wants to hear.
We might need to hear some stories on that today. I don't
probably
know.
like write a book about that experience. And then, but it was awesome, and the company was great. It was definitely like they invested in their employees and grow from within and promote from within. And then we moved to Oklahoma, and we got a contract in Oklahoma, and I started those programs, and actually was the state director. So it wasn't like the therapist necessarily, but kind of ran all of that stuff. And by the time we left, I think we had 3 locations and 25, 30 employees, and so that was cool. And then when we moved to Cincinnati, stayed with the company and did some like remote stuff, and then COVID hit, so that was like a good job to have during that. And then went and I was like, do I still like therapy? Am I still good at this? Because I hadn't done it in a while. I'd done like all the administrative stuff, leadership stuff, and I loved it. And so went back and practiced at a couple of different practices, and then the Lord was like, hey, it's time to start your own thing. And I feel like the experiences that I had prior to starting my own thing to kind of learn how to do that and how they were doing that, and I hadn't ever had that experience before, so it was really, really good learning experience. And so now I have my own practice, and I love it.
Yeah, and I'd like to hit on that more as well, like the actual running of your business and stuff. But quickly, since Jamie probably already knows this, but the rest of us don't, is tell us a little bit about just like your God story, like as a kid growing up, like, and how'd you, do you come into the kingdom early where you met Jesus, or tell us a little bit about your God story.
So, so I grew up in a atheistic household. Okay. My dad was a hardcore atheist, and Mom was kind of like whatever, So I remember having conversations with some of my elementary school friends where they're like, "You don't believe in God?" And I was like,
I would have
"No,"
been, I would be like at church, school.
Yeah,
going
they
out
were.
Like, you what?
They were. It was the Bible Belt, Oklahoma,
Yeah, for sure.
So,
right.
Yeah, so it was interesting. But we had some kind of random church experiences growing up. Like my grandparents would come to town, and to honor them, we would go to church with them in town, and that was the only time we would go. And I thought it was odd, you know.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then
Were your grandparents believers? Were they followers of Jesus? Oh, okay.
my mom's dad and stepmom
Okay.
were, and then my mom's mom and stepdad were. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So they would send us birthday cards. We're praying for you,
Oh,
you
okay.
know. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what that is. I
All
guess
right.
that's nice, you know.
Good to have grandparents
nice.
praying for
Yeah.
you, man. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
Then.
So when I became a believer, like they were pumped, you know. But yeah, so then I remember in high school, like just walking around. I remember going to like specifically where I was in the school and stuff, like walking through the hallway, and I was like, "Is this all there is? Like, is this like I'm just supposed to like achieve in school and then like get a job and like have a family?
Wow.
You know, like it seemed so
What
dead.
grade? How old were you?
Probably freshman, sophomore.
Okay, that's awesome.
Deep question then.
Yeah, and so it just I felt kind of empty, you know. Not that I didn't have, you know, good experiences and whatever, but just empty, you know. And then so I started going with, so I played all the sports, and I had friends who played all the sports, and believing friends who played sports. So that was kind of my entry into the kingdom. And so, so I went to like FCA with them and they had like donuts, and they played fun
There
things.
you go, man.
Yeah, you know. And I was
That'll
like,
get any high school kid in, or cops.
Yep.
Donuts.
Or pizza, you know?
Or pizza.
Yeah, they always had food and they always had fun, and then there was some, you know, Bible stuff.
Right.
And so yeah, I went a couple times. I was like, "Huh, this is interesting." And then one of my friends, she was like, "Hey, there's this drama." It was like a traveling drama that would go around to different churches and do this like kind of when you die, if you're a believer, this is what happens. If you're not, this is what happens. It was called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames.
I've seen that.
Yeah. And they're like, "Hey, you should come." And I was like, I don't want to do that, you know. And she was like, "I'll buy you a Sonic slushie if you come." And I was like, "Sold."
Ching, baby.
Sonic slushy
I love it.
evangelism.
Who doesn't love the Sonic slushie?
So I'm seeing a pattern here with like food and like, yeah, the Lord got me
Yeah,
in
man.
the kingdom with
Yeah,
food.
yeah. Well, that's how I came in. It was like the Sunday after, you know, when they do the potluck and
Yeah.
bring everything. I'm like, man, if this is how Christians eat, I mean, no, not really.
Yeah. So I went and just from the very beginning, I don't think I even took a sip of the slushie because I was just like, "Whoa, is this real?
It's kind of powerful. I mean, I've
Like, is
I've
this
seen
a
that.
real? Like, is this really what
Yeah.
happens? Like,
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a time like the devil would come out. You know, it was kind of it was what probably today would be called a fear tactic,
Sure.
but they had really good churches like come in and like follow up. It wasn't just like, "Okay, good luck with that," you know.
Right. Okay.
And so yeah, I thought like Satan looked right at me and was like, you know, did whatever, and I was like, you know. So I gave my life to Christ that night, and I am telling you, like even on the drive home, like I had all these questions. And so my best friend, her brother was the youth minister at their church, and she was like, "I just got to get you to my brother. I got to get you to my," because she didn't know, you know, the answers.
Right.
And I felt a complete difference, a change, like access to something completely different
Wow.
inside of me.
Like right away.
Right away, immediately.
Wow. That's
And I
so
remember
cool.
going home and sitting in my room, like my dark room, and thinking, "Okay, how's this going over with the fam?" You know, especially my dad. And I was like, "Okay, well." I remember thinking this too. He, you know, he respects me, and he respects my intelligence.
Right.
I probably have the best chance at sharing this with him and him actually, like coming to know the Lord. And so, that hasn't happened, but you know, had the opportunities to do that many, many times over the years, and yeah. So anyway, but yeah, the Lord entered in, and then my sister started coming to church and got saved like within 3 or 6 months. My mom rededicated her life within 6 months. Like I knew that I was like the Lord told me that night, like you're a light in this place, in this dark place. Like you're a light.
That's amazing. So you're even like you're hearing from the Lord. You're hearing from the Holy Spirit, even like immediately.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so.
Yeah, but
That
would
is
I have
awesome.
said
That is so
God
good.
told me that? Like
Right.
Sure.
I wouldn't have probably known how to
understand
communicate
now,
that, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what? A couple quick questions I got in that is how now. So you were you like a junior, like you were upperclassman at this point or something like
I was
that?
a
Or what?
sophomore.
Sophomore.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about your friend? How old was she? Your best friend?
She was a junior.
And then how old was her brother? I'm just
He
curious.
was like 25,
Okay, so he was a little bit older.
24.
I don't know. We've just been talking a lot about like next generation
Maybe
and
younger 20s.
and we kind of joke about it, but I remember leading a Bible study at my high school when I was like in 8th or ninth
Mhm.
grade, and then I remember when I was a senior at my church, I was actually became the whatever youth director over junior high ministry,
Yeah.
stuff like
Right.
that. So it's amazing. I guess what I'm trying to encourage is that anybody out there is that there really is no junior Holy Spirit, and you can make a huge impact on
Yeah.
on kids' lives and
Yeah.
your friends, just by following whatever the Lord's doing and believing it yourself. Because it sounds like the friends you had that you were playing sports with and stuff like really followed Jesus, or at least some of them did enough where
Yeah. Well,
they cared about you.
some of them did, and then I had like how you have different groups of friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the Lord used me to like connect everybody, and then everybody started going to church, became a believer. Like
Wow.
it was like the whole friend group became that.
Wow.
And my sister's friend group, and then like outside of their friend group, right? So it was like this, and I'm not saying it was just me, but it was just that
Sure.
time frame
Sure.
and our youth group that was
Right.
really strong.
Right.
You
Right. So what I'm hearing you say, so you really through FCA is where that kind of began. So you got this prayer church ministry, but then was it that church you started going to where this
no,
girl's
it
brother
was
or a different church?
yeah, it was my friend's church.
Right.
Yeah, it
So
was a
you started
Baptist
going.
church,
So
yeah.
then you're plugging into church, and I've said that a lot of times. Like one of my best friends was over Young Life down in when we lived in Durango, Colorado, and we had such an amazing setup there because he got all he had all these non-Christians that he was bringing into Young Life, and so I came and assisted him there, and then I was the youth pastor in my church, and he came and assisted me, and so then when someone got brought to Christ, they already are good. They already know his name is Bill, my friend Bill. They don't know me, but Bill knows me, and then vice versa. But when I would come in and be on part of their deal, then he was able to introduce me. And so I guess, yeah, it sounds like that was really cool where the Lord used like a couple of different ministry opportunities and ministry things to bring you
Yeah.
into it.
And it's interesting. I was thinking out of that group. So I from day one just lit on fire. Like I had a purpose now.
Wow.
And so I read the Bible in a year, like not even on purpose, not even on a plan, just like
That's awesome.
to the day.
That's so
I finished the Bible. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And felt called to ministry within the year.
Wow.
And then there was like 5 of our smallish youth group,
Mm-hmm.
like really dedicated 10-ish people. When there's fun stuff, 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
5 of us went into ministry.
That's crazy.
From that time frame,
Wow, that's
and
crazy.
so we were leading our own Bible studies and doing outreach stuff, and
That's awesome.
it was awesome.
Yeah, that's the part where I always am asking, even for myself, like this, and we've talked about this, the sovereignty of the Lord. I mean, why did you read the Bible? Why did you, I mean, that is that part that's like, shout out to John Calvin, that is that part where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm born in America to Christian parents who birthed me in a pew, I don't know why I pick up the Bible when I'm little and start reading it and think it's fascinating,
Right.
So, and that sounds very similar to how the Holy Spirit was
Yeah.
moving in your
And
your life.
that youth minister and then the pastor at that church became like really kind of was my second dad,
Mhm.
and so there was a lot of discipleship happening.
Right.
They were teaching us how
Cool.
to live your life
Yeah.
in Him,
Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah.
really cool.
But Southern Baptist, there wasn't a whole lot of Holy Spirit stuff,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So you mentioned call to ministry,
Mhm.
and you just mentioned Southern Baptist, not a whole lot of hearing God's voice kind of talk. Well, how did you discern a call to ministry? And then how did you kind of step into thinking about counseling and therapy and being a licensed therapist specifically?
Yeah.
How did that discernment process happen?
Um,
It feels weird to ask you because I kind of know the answer a little bit, but
yeah.
for the benefit of the listener.
Well, it was
and for me.
it was almost like as simple as, what else am I gonna do? Like, of course I'm gonna follow Him as closely and as furiously as possible. Like, there's nothing else worth doing. Like pre-Christ, I was like, oh, I wanted to be an astronaut actually, and I was like, I'm gonna go to the Navy, fly jet pilots, and then go into be a astronaut. And that,
Oh, I can see that with Jess.
yeah,
I know Jess. I can see
that
yeah,
that like
that's funny.
it went away. I mean, I still love Top Gun, but and space movies.
Na, 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 na.
Who does?
but yeah, that went away. It was just like, what else am I going to do, really? You know, it wasn't even a question. And the Lord, I mean, I heard him say, you're going to, before I went to my undergrad, I knew I was going to seminary.
Hmm.
Didn't really fully know what seminary was. I just knew I was
Right.
going, you know.
You heard it.
Um,
Cemetery or seminary, I know something.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so I just knew that, and then that environment was such, like helping us cultivate the fire within, right? And so there was, you know, like I said, several of us that were like all in, like going for it. So that helped,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't weird to go into ministry, you know.
Right.
What was weird was that I was a female,
Ah.
right? And oh, okay, well, you'll probably do children's ministry. Well, I didn't want to do children's ministry. I didn't feel called to children's
Right.
ministry.
Right.
Oh, okay, well, maybe you'll do even youth or something like that. And I did do youth, and I loved it, and I love teenagers, but like that's not what I knew I was going to do with the rest of my life. So he just kept saying, "You're just abandoned to me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like the vocation doesn't matter. Just abandoned to me."
That's good.
That's good. Yep.
You know, and I was like, "All right, I trust you. I'll do it."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went to school, to my undergrad, on a soccer scholarship, and I kind of just went where I got a soccer scholarship. In the little school in the middle of Missouri, Missouri Valley College. Shout out,
Yeah.
because they never get shout outs probably.
What are they? What's their? What are they? What are they?
Are
Rap
the
Vikings.
Vikings?
Vikings.
Yeah.
Okay. Vikings in the middle of Missouri.
And they straight
okay.
ripped off the Minnesota Vikings, like, you know,
All purple and
Yeah. Purple and orange. That's what we were.
So
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Go Vikings.
So
Woo!
I'm sure there's some sort of
The
copyright
NAIA
thing there.
or
Skull.
something.
Yeah.
Skull.
So I went on a soccer scholarship, which was awesome, and played soccer. And that was a dark season, kind of, because, you know, everybody's sowing their oats and whatever, and no one's going to church. Like, it wasn't a Christian school. If people were believers, they didn't care. You know, they weren't going after it. And so
They weren't gonna let you know.
yeah, they didn't care. They wanted to go party, you know, and stuff.
Yeah. Right.
And so that was dark, and it didn't cause me to question, but it was like, how do I come out of this into like seminary and ministry and stuff? You know, it was. So I had like the Lord like had to stay really close during that time, and then I went to seminary. And even when I enrolled in seminary, it was like, what's your major? And like in class, they'd be like, everybody stand up and introduce what you're doing. And it's like, I'm going to be a pastor, and I'm going to be a missionary, and I'm going to whatever, you know? And I was like, I'm just doing whatever the Lord tells me to do.
That's good.
Love it.
And,
Love that.
you know, people would be like,
Love
what,
that.
you know? And because when I first started, first semester, I didn't know. I knew I was supposed to be there, but I didn't know what I was doing
Mhm.
in terms of like vocation.
Right.
And, yeah, and then
Right.
and then I hadn't ever even considered therapy, counseling, whatever. I knew it existed, whatever, right? But like then I went to like it was like a teaser thing. Like they were like, "Hey, are you interested?" You know.
Right.
And you go and they talk, and it was almost not exactly like my salvation experience, but it was like all the puzzle pieces just go plink,
Oh wow.
you know? And I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do."
Okay.
You know?
So what was your undergraduate degree in then?
It was in elementary education.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at least some, connect into.
And
like,
really,
yeah,
I
wow.
thought, okay, I didn't really know why elementary education. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
because I do
Yeah.
feel like I have a teaching gift, but it was
Right.
also like, oh, if I'm a missionary, I can homeschool my kids or whatever. You know, I didn't know.
Right.
I knew I wasn't going to be
Exactly.
in the classroom though, like in America.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Wow. So
Yeah.
cool. Nice.
So let's fast forward, because when you talked about being a therapist in a lockdown facility,
Yeah.
that sounds intense.
yeah,
That sounds stressful.
and we had 2 little kids.
2 little kids.
Caden was 9 months old.
You're dealing with like people's hurts. You're dealing with people's stress, crisis, trauma. And I can just imagine. I mean, I do pastoral counseling. I'm not a professional like you, but I do some of that, and sometimes it's really difficult. People are sharing like really, really hard stuff, and you start to internalize that, and it starts to kind of get on you a little bit. And this whole podcast, we're calling it With Him, and we're trying to pick up on Jesus's words: "Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And Jesus encountered all kinds of stress and seemed to live freely and lightly. So how do you internalize or hear all this trauma, but not allow it to just derail your life like coming home, hanging out with a husband that's amazing, but and kiddos that are amazing. But how do you do that? I mean, how do you listen to that kind of trauma, but still live a life that's freely and lightly with the Lord, and that doesn't kind of get on you, or and maybe it did, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I don't internalize it. That's the answer. But what my experiences have done over the years is help me figure out how with the Lord how to do that. You know, like I didn't start day one not doing that. Like you internalized everything because it was like it's my life's goal and I'm gonna help these people and it was like poverty, right? Like in Dallas County, and it was like wow, this is there's generational patterns of trauma here that I'm like a little blink in their lives, right? So like how do I even make a change there or whatever? So I realized pretty quickly I had to rely on the Lord to do any of that, right? Like cuz it's like I don't know. You guys know that story where there's like you went on the beach and there's all these starfish or whatever. And,
Oh, yeah.
if I throw one back, that's
one.
how it felt, and it can feel overwhelming. But anytime I've felt overwhelmed, I look at what am I focused on? I'm focused on trying to do this in my own power, or I'm focused on myself, but definitely trying to do it in my own power. Like I can do it, right? And so the secret for me living freely and lightly is just not doing it in my own power.
Yeah.
And if I step into that, the Lord is pretty quick to be like, hey, you're doing that thing, and so I don't know, I think that's part of the equation, but the other part is like, you can hear people's like tremendously tragic stories, and I do all the time every day. But it's like a privilege to be able to sit across from somebody and watch their healing journey, and that's part of that. Well, that's probably the main thing that kind of keeps therapists, I would say, kind of coming back to like it's a privilege from the Lord to be able to sit in front, because I'm his representative, whether they know that or not, in that moment, moving towards healing.
So how do you protect your heart? I'm just thinking about this has happened to me. I'll be like doing pastoral counseling or pastoral care, and I'll feel like the need to like rescue this person, solve it, and then I heard you say earlier, it's like it's not you doing it in your own strength. Do you ever feel those moments where your heart starts to slip into, oh, I'm starting to actually try to be the Jesus that they need, but I can't do it. Like try to be the rescuer, try to be the hero, and it becomes more about you than them. Do you experience that kind of shift, and are you able to kind of push back on that, or how do you experience
I
that?
probably used to more than I do now. Again, as you kind of figure out how to keep your own mental health in a really good place,
Right.
and hear all this, tragic stuff from people, and walk with them through it. But it's harder with teenage. I've always found it's harder with kids and teenagers because they didn't sign up for the life that they're in.
Yeah,
right?
I can see that. Yeah.
They didn't sign up for the generational patterns of trauma they were born into, and they didn't sign up for their parents being tremendously mentally unhealthy, right? Or to be born into poverty. Like they didn't choose any of that. And so I have a harder time. Like I feel like the justice part of me rises up sometimes where it's like, hey, but when that happens, I try to just like give it to the Lord. And then he reminds me like, I got this. Right. So just, so what it turns into is encouragement, exhortation, and, just like being there to help, a family kind of walk through changes, and, so I would say it's harder with younger people. With adults, it's a little easier, only because like it would not be beneficial to them for me to like steal their journey. Right? Like we've all got this like journey that we're on, and if I insert myself in some unhealthy way, right? Like it would be stealing something from them that the Lord wants to do in their lives. And so like it's easier to stay connected to that mentality, I think, with adults. I don't feel like I need to rescue them. Sometimes it's harder with younger people.
Right. Right.
because you look at their scenarios and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you do need rescue,
Yeah.
Right.
but I'm not the one.
Let me ask you like a couple of things in there. It's making me think of is the beauty. And man, I mean, I would think anybody feel that if you have a heart at all. When you're looking at a kid and you're like, well, he didn't sign up to be sexually abused,
Right.
or like you say, you're even just being generations of poverty, whatever it
Right.
might be. But it, I. I'm wondering if maybe for you on your end of it, if almost it's a gift of faith that has to rise up, or a faith that Jesus does have them. Because I mean, they're really like Jesus, and the scripture are very clear on it. It's like, I am the God of the orphaned, I am the God of the broken. Those of you who have no money, come and eat freely of me, and all. And so it's almost like, we see these scriptures, and I believe the Lord for these things, but it's almost like faith has to rise up in you. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like you have to turn them over to the Lord. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there you go. You
100%.
said that you're the father to the broken. You're the
Right.
father to the fatherless. You're the, and I think he would be. I think he will step into that.
Mhm.
But it almost feels like from your position. And again, I'm kind of thinking of even someone who isn't a believer, who's doing
Mhm.
what you do or whatever, is it's really an act of faith just to rise up and be able to turn them over. And I guess in some sense you're doing that with the adults too, because isn't that the gist of like, again, I'm a lay person in all this, but like a codependency. I mean, isn't that what codependency does? It doesn't let the person go to the
Right.
place that they need to
Right.
get to,
Right.
or whatever. So really almost everything you're saying is almost like open-handed. Because like,
Absolutely.
there you go. I mean, I'm going to give you some tools here. I'm going to
Right.
listen to you. I'm going to do that. But in the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like,
and I take like, I mean, this is probably no brainer, but like I take super seriously what the Lord has allotted to me for the time that I'm with somebody,
okay.
right? Like
Oh, that's cool.
as the therapist,
Oh, that's
right?
cool. Uh-huh.
And so like I, it's like a deep honoring of their time, their money, their commitment to their healing process. Because when you're processing trauma, it's so hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's like
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on in the brain
Mm-hmm.
and the body and the emotions. That's just like
Like it's courageous on their part to be doing
absolutely
that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So they're buying into this process where it's like, okay, and they're trusting me because of my experience and expertise to help them through that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, and the whole time I'm just praying constantly with the Lord when somebody's in front of me, like, hey, this you have to. I can't tell you how many times I tell the Lord, like, you got to do something.
Right. Right.
Wow.
You got to do something.
That's good.
Like you,
Just while you're listening to him, you're
you-
like, okay.
like, and then sometimes like somebody will be talking, I'm like, I have no idea.
I like that.
I have no idea what to say right now, and I'm
Right.
always like, all right, Lord.
Right.
So this is a time where, I mean, He's doing stuff all the time,
Sure.
but really, I'm like, all right,
Sure.
Lord. And then 100% of the time, the Spirit takes the moment. And again, this is believer, non-believer, right? It doesn't
Right.
really matter if
Right.
the client
They
is a
are.
believer
Yeah,
or
yeah.
non-believer. Like
Right.
I'm still
Sure.
communing with them like this, and man, He just comes through every time. Whether it's with telling me something, like giving me insight that I wouldn't have had otherwise, which happens all the time,
Now that's
or
intriguing. That's interesting.
or working in them, through them, while they're in the session.
So I know HIPAA's a thing. I know you can't give names and things like that. But I wonder, is there a story or a scenario that you could share to kind of help us? As I love everything you're saying. I love you as well. But I love everything you're saying because
Isn't that
So
nice?
nice.
'cause I
He had
think
to say that.
I think a lot of times, 21 years of experience, countless many, many years of training, hours spent studying all of other psychologists, all this stuff. It's easy to just rely on your skills. It's
Mhm.
just easy to rely on, well, I read in the book, and here's the tool, and here's the
Mhm.
therapy, and here's what you do. But is there a story or maybe share with us a little bit about how that actually works? Like this person's talking, you're feeling like, ugh, I got nothing. Lord, Jesus, would you come, and Holy Spirit, would you come and help this situation? Is there a story or maybe you can
Yeah.
talk through
So
some of that with
maybe
us?
instead of super specifics, I'll just do semi-general.
Great. You're the
Um,
professional that knows HIPAA, so we don't want to
yeah.
get in on it.
Yeah. So
Hypothetically,
right, right,
I have this friend.
right. So one of my specialty areas, because of my experience, has been trauma, like helping people who
Okay.
have experienced trauma process that it not be such a, like, obviously trauma is always going to be a part of their story, but for it to not be such a, like, trigger, right? For them to be triggered by all the things.
Yeah.
And so even before, I just got trained in EMDR recently, and even before that,
EMDR?
Yeah, for us
Yeah.
non-smart people.
so it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's basically a trauma approach. It's an approach to treat trauma using brain science.
Cool.
Cool.
And I was always a little skeptical of it on the outside, like, oh, what are you doing? Because there's like finger waving and things, and I'm like, what skill does that take? But anyway, so I got trained in this process, even and still, before that, called myself like very skilled in helping people do work through trauma, and now I feel like the Hulk.
Hey.
Nice.
Like
Like a
it's-
mental health Hulk? Is that
Yeah.
what you're
For all the
describing?
people out there, and we're
Yeah.
going to give her number at the end.
I'm telling you.
Just smash.
Yeah, like I'm like, oh my goodness, and I just thank the Lord every time I get to do this with people, because it's it's using, and there's other amazing approaches to treating trauma. Obviously, I've used them for 21 years, right? But like the ability to also have this tool. So anyway, to answer your question, often in EMDR processing sessions, it's kind of a free association process without explaining all of EMDR. It's like a free association process where you bring up kind of a negative neural network, like I'm not worthy or I'm not valuable, right? Or whatever the underlying kind of cognition is that this person's functioning under based on their traumatic experiences or negative experiences. And so regularly, we'll be processing that, and it's literally just free association on the part of the client, and for a period of time, and then I stop them and I say, what'd you notice? And they say what their brain brought up, because the brain will bring up what needs to be brought up as sticking points,
Mm.
and it will heal itself while you are processing through that. It's
Wow.
wild.
It's almost like God has created us
I
in
know,
such an
I love it.
amazing. We're fearfully and wonderfully made
Yeah,
by the Lord. It's awesome.
the brain
Sorry,
wants
keep
to
going.
heal
I
itself.
love that.
The brain wants to and can heal itself.
Yeah, it's
you know?
awesome.
So, through like terrible. So anyway, so I get to sit there and watch, and the whole time I'm like, because I'm new to the EMDR process, I'm like, all right, Lord, like, please let this work. Like I don't.
No, I'm doing the
No,
finger
I
waving
don't have a
thing
ton
here,
of
but-
experience watching this work. I hear it where I've read it.
Yeah.
I've trained its work, and so watching the Lord walk with somebody, but again, kind of believer, non-believer, like it doesn't matter really. But watching I'm consistently, because there's periods of time where I'm sitting there counting, right? Like, oh, we're gonna process for 25 seconds, and I'm just like, and I'm like, so it's not relying on insight, which is what my job as a therapist is, to help people have insight, right? But so it switches your job just a scotch, right? So anyway, so I am praying to the Lord like the whole time, talking to him, and even this week, it's like, because depending on the length of processing depends on the person's brain, right, and what they need. And it's my job to figure out, do we need to go shorter or longer based on responses and stuff. And so I just like gave that to the Lord this week, and he would, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but like he would be like 29 seconds,
Whoa.
Awesome. That's awesome.
47 seconds.
Just giving it to you.
Mhm.
Awesome.
And
Whoa.
I would do it, and
It's cool, babe.
amazing, like
Awesome.
it would be the exact amount of time,
Right.
and I don't always hit it, right? But, and sometimes we need to go longer, whatever. But, yeah.
But you just kind of knew. I mean,
Yeah.
that was.
Well, it's funny if you
wow.
think about it. Jesus is the best mental health professional
Yep.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And you're like partnering up with him in that moment. I love that
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
awesome with him
It's
right
so
there.
cool.
And then I've had experiences with
really good.
believers who are doing processing where, because a lot of times it's mostly memories, kind of in that negative neural network that exist, memories and experiences, but where he's showing people things for like even the future, right? Like prophetic, like probably more prophetically minded, like the way that he speaks to them already is fairly prophetic, like, and so they're seeing like visions of things, and
Oh, cool.
and it's and we get to the end of the EMDR process, and they're like, I feel a 0 on the intensity of emotion scale.
Beautiful.
And I feel like the opposite, like
Praise the Lord.
instead of I'm worthless, I'm completely worthy,
Yeah.
feels 100% true.
Wow.
Which when we started that 45 minutes ago, didn't feel that way, you know?
Wow.
And so, and then you check it the next time because I'm always like, is this sticking? You know?
Mhm.
And it's there.
Yeah.
So just watching like the Lord heal people through this mental health process, and
Right.
you know, that's an example about EMDR. I've got examples using other methodologies as well, where you just watch like, and I just feel completely, I don't know, just like it's a huge privilege to be able to sit in the room and watch the Lord do that with somebody.
Mhm.
You know?
And we talk a lot about different giftings that people have and so on. And one of the things we practice in a lot of what Jamie and I are doing is is what we call prophetic words or words of knowledge and that kind of thing. Have you had that happen as well when you're like, like, I mean, I've even had this happen when I'm praying for someone or something like that. But have you ever had it happen where someone's talking about something and you're like, nope, that's not the Lord shows you. It's like, well, what about your older brother? What about that?
Mhm.
Like they've never talked about that or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, that
Like every
that lights it
single
up.
every single day.
Oh, that's
Every
awesome.
single day.
Oh, that's awesome. Now talk
Yeah.
about with him right there,
Yeah.
man. That
And
that is awesome.
it's amazing because I think like I know that the Lord gifted me prophetically, but I wouldn't have said that like back in the day. You know, even like Jamie and I had, this journey to figure out, the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
Oh, the Holy Spirit.
He gets to play too. He wants
Right?
to be a part of what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
And
hear it.
but even before that, I look back and I'm like, oh, he's always been talking to me. He's always been telling me stuff.
Would you have called it like intuition
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
because I'm just thinking about the person who's listening to this that maybe they're like, oh, they hear prophecy or prophetic,
Yeah.
and they start to get a little bit intimidated.
Yeah.
But some people may be actually really prophetically gifted, but in their mind, they might think this is intuition
Mm-hmm.
or something else. How would you?
Wisdom.
Yeah. So how would you? How would you
Yep.
kind of articulate some of that for the person who doesn't understand maybe some of
Well,
that
like
language?
looking back on it, I can look at things and be like, there's no way that I was that smart or that
Right.
wise to know that thing or to handle that thing that way or to, function in that space at that time in that way. So it's so cool though. Isn't it awesome that the Lord will still do that even though you don't even give him
You
credit?
don't even believe it. You don't even know.
You don't even, you don't know what to call it. You
Yeah.
don't, but, it- and I probably took credit for more things than I definitely should have, right?
Right.
Like, oh, look, I'm good at my job, right? And the Lord's like, yeah, you are, but,
Well, and it shows his heart. He
That's
wants
great.
to heal people.
yeah,
And it's like he'll use. I don't know who created EMDR. I don't know. I don't know if that person's a believer, an
Richard
unbeliever.
Shapiro, but
Oh,
probably
okay.
not.
Yeah. So, but he's happy to use a technology that he probably gave to this individual, and he's happy to use it. Like sometimes we're like, and sometimes in the church world we're like this. It's like we're like scared of any sort of
Yeah,
Bible solutions. We're
Right.
like, oh no,
Right.
God's not going to
Right.
use this
Right.
sort of secular
Yeah.
process.
Blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah,
it's
whatever.
like here, read Psalm 23. Call me in the morning.
Yeah.
And
Well-
I don't want to hate on that. I love the
No.
word, and the word has changed my life as well. So I'm not
Yeah.
hating on that, but it just shows the heart of the Father and heart of Jesus to heal. He'll use all kinds of methods
I
to
mean,
heal someone.
all truth is God's truth.
Yeah. 2
Right?
plus 2 is still 4.
Yeah.
That's the way God designed it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what's cool is he'll allow us to like figure things out and use things and not give him credit
That's amazing.
because it helps, right? It like helps people
Yeah.
or whatever. So
Right.
like
Ooh, that's good.
the seminary that we went to, it was a really interesting experience because it was an integrated program, meaning faith and psychology together. And so it was unique and it was amazing because we got to figure out like, was Freud a believer? Absolutely not, right?
Right.
But like, were there some things that we could pull from? Yeah, that are
Right.
that are work and are truthful. Yeah,
Right.
Right. And so it's like you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because something came from a non-believer, does that mean it's not true? No.
Right.
That's silly.
Right. Right.
Also, the Bible is amazing, but sometimes people need more than a scripture
Right.
to live their lives in the most full, healthy way.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
most time people have exhausted the scriptures
A
and
lot
are
of times that's
still
true. Yep.
in the same stuck spot,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, the integrated program that I came from, I think, set me up really, really well to like be really open to whatever the Lord has out there to help people.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's really good. I often think of like the boy, the father who comes to Jesus, who the boy would throw himself into the fire. Demonic. I don't care how many scriptures you read over that,
Right.
or how many he reads. The boy reads. That demonic spirit had to be dealt with.
Right.
And or the woman who's bleeding. Or whatever. She needed a healing. She needed to experience healing
Right.
from the Lord. Not here. Memorize the Pentateuch, and now you're stop bleeding.
Right.
Right.
Or anybody
just
sitting
logical,
around the well, or the springs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, the pool of Siloam.
Sure, the
pool, the pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like any of those people
Of
probably
course.
very well knew and grew up in
the
the scriptures,
scripture.
right?
Exactly.
And so you're telling me
Exactly.
like they didn't know scripture, like they knew scripture,
Right.
Well, it reminds me, like, remember Jesus is standing before these religious leaders, and he says, "You search the scriptures because you think in them you're going to have life, and I'm standing right here, and you won't come to me."
Right.
It makes me think about, like, it's not that there's anything wrong with the scriptures; it's that we want to come to Jesus,
Right.
Yeah.
not necessarily words on a page.
Right.
And so when we begin to trust words and we think this is some sort of, it almost becomes like magic. Like,
Yes.
if I just memorize these words and I just say them a bunch,
Yeah.
then I'll be healed. No. Jesus is the healer.
Mhm.
Jesus is the one who heals us.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
There's like a spectrum of Christian counseling out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people
Yeah, that's good.
to really know, like, what are you looking for? So some people are looking for, they just want like a biblical base, like a biblical counselor, or like, the thing with biblical counselors is they aren't always licensed and haven't gone through a program, and or at least one that would lead to licensure that a state would grant, right? Which is rigorous and hard and difficult, and they put you through the ringers to make sure that you're good.
Right.
Make sure you're not going to do harm to people.
Right.
So biblical counselors don't always have that experience. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's not what people need,
Right.
But just knowing that the different levels that people are at, right? And then sometimes people call themselves Christian counselors and may or may not ever incorporate, faith into the
Yeah,
process,
I've seen that.
depending on who you are, what you want, whatever, right?
Mhm.
Like for me, I incorporate my faith in what I do every moment that I'm doing therapy and every day that I'm working with people in a therapeutic
That's good.
fashion.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't matter if they're a believer or not. Now, sweet spot is they're a believer,
Mhm.
and we can do that, and we can actually like verbalize some things that are going on,
Right.
because there is a there's a point at which it's like, well, what I feel like I'm on shifting sand. Somebody who's not a believer having trouble with shifting sand. Well, you're having trouble with shifting sand because you're standing on the wrong thing.
Sand.
know?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good word.
And
Yeah.
so, and the Lord has given me opportunities at times to have some of those conversations in therapeutic environments where it's appropriate,
Does that threaten your professional licensure at all? Like, to talk about Jesus? And I've already talked to you about this a little bit, but I think this is interesting. Like, because you're not just leading with Jesus all the time, but how does that work exactly?
like in word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not
I'm not
proselytizing.
saying
You're not
so.
evangelizing.
Jesus just told me to a
Right, right.
non-believer. Yeah.
So
that
how do
was-
you navigate some of that especially with an unbeliever?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, talk about.
Well, on my bookshelf are books that talk about, like, I think I have a big one it's kind of the standard in Christian counseling. It's like a big, and it says Christian counseling on it,
Right.
And so I kind of looked over there one time and I thought, I wonder if that people look at that, and I know they do, because when you're in therapy, you're looking at stuff while you talk,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think people probably know that I am a Christian counselor, but I don't. Like, I'm not going to, like, I'll ask about faith and what about faith with you, and like, is that important, is that something you want to incorporate? And so when they say yes, even if they're not believers, because a lot of times people will say yes but they're not believers, we talk about it.
Mhm.
And then so I just see how far the Lord wants to take that, and or they're willing to go, and that's how far we go. And so sometimes I'll say, hey, this book is really good. It is a faith-based book, right? And somebody will read it and be like, yeah, that was too faithy for me,
Mhm.
or whatever. And I'm like, okay,
Too
great,
faithy. That's right.
and we'll go in a different direction or whatever.
Right.
But I'm still doing and saying what the Lord wants me to do in the moment.
Mhm.
And that's what makes me a Christian counselor,
Sweet.
you know?
And if they ask, you can talk about Jesus if they ask.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, you're like, how do you know?
Yeah, I still listen to the Lord for them. And he still has things to say to them
Right.
and about their scenarios and about their situations.
Yeah,
I just don't say, oh, the Lord just told me,
Right.
Gotcha.
you know?
Yeah.
Same thing like when we were back in Oklahoma, I got to meet, we had to build relationships with all these different, different entities within the state, including, state capitol people, governor, representatives and stuff. And we'd regularly be in meetings and I'd hear the Lord, be saying things. And we'd have, and the meeting would go tremendously well. And then we would, but I didn't say to them, like, I'm listening to the Lord and he says whatever, right?
Yeah.
I just listen to the Lord and he says whatever. And then it's like the faith to step out and into that.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I don't proselytize. It's interesting because I remember that was one of the questions when I first interviewed with Youth Villages. I remember that who became my supervisor. He's like, "So you got your degree from a seminary?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he's not a believer.
Was he giving you like a side eye?
Well,
as
he was
asked
kind of
it?
like he kind of asked like, "What are you gonna
How's it-
do?" Like how is that? He wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna go out and just, you know, Bible beat everybody,
Right.
and yeah, which makes sense. And it's not what you should do.
Mhm.
Right.
It's not.
Right. Right. Which makes sense. But what's so funny about that, or the irony, I guess, within that is literally, I don't want to approach the one who's made the brain, who can bring the healing, and so on and so forth. I mean, I can't. I mean, I could be wrong, but I almost couldn't imagine a worse job than your job as a non-believer.
Mm,
Because I mean, I'm sure there's some success, but I also know I think there's a fairly high depression, suicide rate, and so on among that particular field. And of course they can, they have some success,
mhm.
but it's so amazing to be able to step into the one who's made the brain, who's,
Well, your solid ground when I think
know.
this is my opinion. Your solid ground when you're a non-believing therapist
Mhm.
is the theory,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
is the
Right.
yeah,
Sure.
the intervention based
Sure.
on the theory.
Right.
Um, and that's a level, right? But like the solid ground for me and hopefully Christian therapists is Jesus.
Mhm.
And then the theory sits on top, right?
Mhm.
So it's like there's two levels of solid ground,
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously this is the solid ground.
Yeah.
Theory is always
Yeah.
morphing and changing and whatever, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think I mean
That's
there's
good.
definitely healing that can come and does
For sure.
come from non-believing,
For sure.
therapists,
I
but
just feel like that would be because, especially when you're saying like, especially I think where it'd be really hard is when you're sitting there like what you said, like I don't know where to, I don't know
Yeah.
where to go from here.
yeah.
Well, okay, then I'm just going to throw a theory out. Then
Yeah.
then I guess it becomes who's learned the most theories or learned the best stuff,
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
or whatever. But of course, yeah, and I'm not dogging that. Anybody out there who doesn't follow Jesus is a great therapist. Bless you.
Yeah.
The one other thing
I do feel like can I
go
say
ahead.
one
Yeah,
more
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
a big difference is I don't depend on my own wisdom. Um and again I've grown into that, right? Like I don't depend on my own wisdom. Do I have wisdom? Yeah. Do I have experience? Yes. But I depend on the Lord to speak to me using those
Right.
things, right? And so I think the dependence part is different too for
Mm.
somebody who's a believing
Yep.
therapist versus a,
Yep.
or a Christian
Right.
therapist.
Well, and
versus
that's the
somebody who's not.
huge with him. See, and I would even challenge what we've said before is there's probably believing therapists who aren't doing it with him.
Right,
I mean, you're literally describing with him right there.
Right.
right.
Like I'm just depending on him.
It's the
What is he going
dependence,
to tell
yeah.
me? What's he, what direction should I go? What blah blah blah.
Because you got to
It's
think,
amazing.
like, I'm thinking, as a believing therapist, it may be easier to just trust the process and
Mhm.
trust this specific intervention. Oh, this intervention worked last time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means it'll work this time. And you almost begin to trust methodology, you trust your training, you
Mhm.
trust your textbook, you trust these interventions, even if it's EMDR. Well, it's always EMDR. No, not necessarily.
Right.
What if Jesus says, hey, EMDR is great, but right now what I'm doing is some sort of CBT, cognitive behavioral thing.
Right.
And we're going to go here.
Right.
And it's like it's so funny. It's like, it seems like we would almost be more fruitful, even in mental health field. You're more fruitful if you're following Jesus rather than trusting, oh, here's the Rolodex of interventions. This one always works for this particular problem. I just do it. Boom, done.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and you think about, like, I was thinking about other professions, like, the outcome with this profession, it's not about money, right? Like, a lot of times, like, if I'm a financial planner and I wanna walk with him, amazing. Like, that is amazing. The outcome is blessings financially, right? This feels heavier, where it's like living freely and lightly, and having some horrific experiences, or and being able to be a whole individual afterward. Like, that's not a given. In fact, a lot of people are just stuck because of the horrendous experiences that they've had, right? And so, and just weird ways of thinking about life and people and relationships. So, like, the stakes are high, right?
yeah.
It's not about
That's good.
finance. It's about the health of your it's the stability and health of your life
Yeah.
and the people in your life, your
Around that,
family,
yeah,
your your
exactly,
kids,
Exactly.
Yeah.
your
It's huge. Yeah, so multiplies out.
yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say to the listener? I'm thinking about the listener who they've got trauma. They've got stuff going on. They're not sure about therapy. They're not sure like who to go to. And they're maybe hearing some of this conversation, maybe feeling a little nervous, like, I want to find the Jess. Jess can't, treat everyone in the U.S., but I want to find somebody who's trying to do it like Jess's way, and then feeling nervous. What if it's an unbeliever? Like, is that terrible? Does God not want me to go to an unbelieving therapist? I don't even know the answer to any of this. I'm just asking you, for that person who's listening to this, and like, I need to find a therapist. I need to go to therapy. I'm just not sure about like how to go about that. And what would you say to that person?
So, yeah, it's hard because I don't even know like everybody in Cincinnati that's functioning the way I am, or the way like a healthy, Christian therapist is, or should be. You just kind of know who you run into and who you trust, right? And and we've only been here 5 years, so I don't know all the people, and not like like you said, Paul, like not all Christian counseling is the same, and so I think there's some questions that you can ask people, right? Like, first, find out if you want a believing therapist. Make sure they're a believer before you go see them, right? Because almost everybody has like a consult or like a 15-minute, get to know
So
you.
you can just ask them straight up.
conversation.
Are you
Absolutely.
saying just look at them and say, "Are you a believer?"
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah. Now, some might give you a weird answer. If they give you a weird answer, like question mark, but because that is maybe a better question, actually, because that's a fairly personal question. And I, as a therapist, I don't always share personal stuff, because there does need to be like a separation there a little bit, but especially when you're just meeting somebody. But a better question probably is, do you incorporate faith in therapy? And if so, how?
Oh yeah.
You know,
Wow, question. That's
how?
good.
Yeah. Because sometimes folks incorporate faith into therapy, but they're not Christians. And that sometimes works well for people, but that might not be what you're looking for. So I think that would be a good question.
That's good.
And then I have heard anecdotally that folks found a Christian therapist, advertised as Christian therapist and whatever, but faith has never come up in the conversation. And I was like, well, bring it up. Like, say something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because for whatever reason, it hasn't come up. I don't know, but like, bring it up. It's important to you. Bring it up.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
because maybe that person's trying to be sensitive, like
Mhm.
you've talked about being sensitive,
Right.
and so they're thinking, well, they haven't really talked much about
Right.
the therapist.
Right.
Maybe thinking, hey, they haven't talked about Jesus much, so I
Right.
better be cool. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Or there's a
That's a
lot of
really good
other
point.
like intensive issues that need to be like talked about maybe ahead of time. So
That's good.
You know.
That's a good suggestion.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really
bring it
good.
up.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So awesome,
Sweaty
awesome.
palms.
So yeah, so I love all the therapy stuff and all that, but something really intrigues me is and kind of hearing your stories. You've worked for a number of different people, it sounds like obviously super challenging with the boys' home and that kind of thing. But then also, it sounds like you really came into a place, really a pretty esteemed place in Oklahoma, where you're like over the whole state. That's what I'm hearing you say, right? In this for this counseling organization, and that was mostly and that was also like for inner city kids, poor kids, that kind of thing. Was
Yeah.
that what
Yeah, it was
that kind of
anybody
thing?
like involved with like CPS
Okay, yeah,
or
that's what I
yeah,
kind of thought I was
child
hearing you
welfare.
say. So that's a huge challenge there. So you must have learned a ton, because obviously you're probably then teaching other people
Mhm.
and so on. So it feels like the Lord has been kind of just, when we talk about it in the Bible with like Joseph or whatever, it's like he's kind of trusting you and moving you up in
Mhm.
different things. And I happen to be a part of some of your journey here when you guys moved out here to Cincinnati. Yay, go Bearcats and whoever. Anyway, so, we got Go Baylor, we've got
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, which was one of
Sooners.
my main rivals, with the
Boomer
University
Sooner.
of Colorado, Oklahoma. And anyway, but I actually kind of got to be part of this journey, which was cool. Is that when you got out here, you ended up in a different position where you were working for another counseling company
Mhm.
and so on. However, I know for a fact that your husband, who loves you dearly, kept bugging you a little bit about, well, why don't you do your own
Yeah.
thing? Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to talk
I
about
appreciate that credit, Raz.
I
I
want to talk
appreciate you
about,
bringing this up. So yeah,
yeah, so she
I was
won't say something
involved.
like, Raz told me I should think
Yeah.
about doing
'Cause
my
that's what
own.
happens to me every time.
I was talking to Raz's wife, Julie, and she was saying, you'd probably be pretty good at doing this on your own. So I thought, yeah,
Jamie's
that's
best conclusions are always based on conversation with Raz, even though we had the same
right,
conversation.
right. I know. I
So
know
funny.
that it always goes down like
That's
that,
okay
right?
though. You can get
It
credit.
always goes down like that.
Yeah.
But but I would love to hear just again with him how you have become an entrepreneur in this, and just sort of that journey for you, because I know it was a challenging journey. It
Yeah.
wasn't easily like, hey, I think I'm gonna go do this and that'll
Right.
be great,
Right.
So
Yeah. So, when you get the opportunity to build something from the ground up and it's really successful, and like that was amazing. And I had also been in environment like I did obviously like a lot of different things for youth villages,
yeah,
but I was always coming into a pre-existing environment, and you know, not always great, right?
true.
And so to try to change the culture and the environment is so much harder than
Yep.
to set it from the get go.
Yep.
And so I got the chance to set it from the get go, and that
Yeah.
was like so hard, but also so amazing.
Right.
And if somebody was like, here, set it from the get go or change it, I would 100 times out of 100
Mhm.
take set it from the beginning.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
there's unique challenges that come from
Sure.
starting something from nothing.
Just
Right.
so the
Right.
listener knows, like, how many employees did you end up leading that company to in Oklahoma, across how many cities?
Yeah,
I'm
I
giving
think
you a chance to brag a little
Yeah,
bit.
I think it was like we started in Tulsa, and it was like me and two other people, and then we grew to be in like 3 locations across the state, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and another location, and then I think I had like 30. We had like 30 employees.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
that's a lot of entrepreneurial type
yeah,
learning there,
yeah.
even though it's not
Now, what was
your
great
thing.
about that experience
Yeah.
was I had this big company in youth villages to lean on, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, they had a lot of really good infrastructure, a lot of good, like, I call it discipleship,
Mhm.
leadership
Mhm.
training.
Yeah.
Um, so I learned so much
Right.
from the infrastructure of youth villages,
Right.
and and then with a big company like that, there's also like stuff that
Mhm.
is
Sure.
like, I
Sure.
don't know, that's probably
Sure.
not great here, right? But
Right.
we're the Borg, so we do the same
Right.
thing everywhere.
Right. Right.
And there's important parts about that.
Sure.
But anyway, so it was a good setting to learn how to um, do that.
Right.
And then when we moved here, I didn't really. It was so chaotic when we moved because Jamie was already here, and it was me and the kids, and I was like, packing the house and leading, like trying to get someone to transition I had been training, kind of discipling this person for 5 years. She was right under me the whole time. And so when I left, she's still rocking it.
Oh wow, that's
Like
So
I talked
awesome.
to her, and
That's cool.
like she's
That's
leading
cool.
several states now, and like
That's
So
doing
awesome.
yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
But it's a picture of discipleship,
Yes. Absolutely.
But like it was hard to flip the keys to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and so. But I knew we were supposed to move. We both knew. We both knew we were supposed to be here, and so I was like, okay, this is going to be gut wrenching, and it was gut wrenching because I didn't even really get a chance to like mourn much of that in a healthy way
Mm-hmm.
because it was the move was so chaotic.
Well, it's something you've built. I mean, you've like
hmm
sort of parented it. I mean, if you went 2 to
Yeah.
30,
I know.
that's something you've really had your hand on and helped build.
Yeah.
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 Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was really hard. And so then I get here and it's like, and I took a drastic pay cut for a different position with youth villages just to have kind of a job when we moved. And, there was some possibility it could turn into something. But the Lord, so I'd been in this company for like 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this process over the year that I stayed doing the remote position. I was just completely unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a tearing away,
Mm-hmm.
because I was bought in to youth villages and everything we did and all that. Like, but there was kind of this tearing away. Like, hey, it's time to go now.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Can
and
I address that just for a second? My wife says this a lot, which I really like. Is that it's hard. I think it's hard for most people to change. I mean, there are people who they love it, or I think or whatever. But she says a lot of times. She said, "Well, how else is God going to get you to move on,
right,
except to put you into pain?"
right,
And sometimes I just think, and sometimes we hold on so tight to things that where that God's been trying to tear you away from it, tears your nails out. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of just for as you're listening in on this, is if you're in one of those situations where it's like, man, this has just been drudgery. And I'm not saying I mean I love the person, and I feel like I'm that kind of person as well. I love the person who hangs in through all the tough stuff because we're all going to have things we don't like in our lives and our jobs and so on. But somewhere along the line, you see that with a person. I've had that even recently with someone in my family. But you see that with a person where you're like, you need to move on.
yeah,
It needs to move on.
yeah,
And so sometimes God. Would you agree? Sometimes God will use difficulty.
yeah. And there's a difference
you know?
in pain, like the type of pain that occurs when something's just hard, but you're supposed to work through it,
I like
and
that. Yes,
something that's
yes,
like it's time to go.
I would agree. That's really good.
There's very different. It's different
It
feeling,
is. It
right?
is.
For the listener, will you try to define that? You're
I
exactly
totally
right,
get that. Yes.
but that's abstract. So
So
how would
the
you
way that I
define that for the
the way that
listener?
I see it, like in the spiritual, what happens is there's like a lifting of the mantle of what you've been assigned to, and um, it can feel like pain and frustration, a lot of frustration, but also just like the way that I think when we've done this together, where it's like this is no longer where the Lord wants us to be.
Mhm.
And but then it can take like a year, to like
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
get where
Yeah.
he wants you to be. But
Yeah.
like the realization of like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, this isn't where I'm supposed to be anymore. And it's not based just on frustration. Like
Right,
I'm mad at
right.
something, so I'm gonna leave.
Right.
But it's
right.
like a lifting of the mantle, like the responsibility
Yeah.
piece adjusts and
Mhm.
changes
Mhm.
in your mind and heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I've almost felt like in that situation, I've almost felt like like nothing feels right.
Yeah.
Like I feel angsty about it. Just nothing feels right. It's not that,
Mhm.
I got in an argument with
And
a staff
and
member
there's
and
no
now we're,
adjustment
pointing
on
at
the
me.
horizon.
nothing.
Sorry, Jess, you were about to say
Well, I was
something
just gonna
awesome.
say, and
Yeah.
there's no adjustment on the horizon.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is what this is gonna be
Yeah. And you're like,
for a long time.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and again, sometimes you are supposed to
Mhm.
work through that, but it's
Absolutely.
like your mindset changes. It's
Mhm.
like what I think what it is the spirit inside you is like, hey, time to go.
I know, right? We fight that.
You know?
I do think,
Yeah,
in
'cause
fact,
we're
I would say the more
comfortable.
capable and comfortable you are, sometimes I think the more you'd fight
Sure.
it because, just people are like, I mean, you love a person that's that kind of a committed person.
Well, and sometimes you're looking
whatever,
at a drastic pay cut,
Yep.
and sometimes you're looking at starting over somewhere, and like
Yep.
that's all scary. Like
Yeah.
like when we made the decision, like okay, yeah, this is time to start my own practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, I was like, all right, can we live off of one, like one salary if this doesn't go well for a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And we're like, yeah, we'll just eat bologna sandwiches and
Probably done it before if you guys were
get rid
sitting
of our
together.
get rid of
So
our Netflix
was-
subscription. You know.
ours was top ramen, bologna
Yeah.
tuna sandwiches. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I get that.
yeah, so it's like a leap of faith.
Yeah.
A leap of
Yeah.
faith. Even when you know he's telling you to do that, it's like,
Mhm.
all right. There is a point at which the way I picture it is you're like on a cliff and he's like, step off.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't know, that looks scary.
That's pretty steep.
And he's like, no, I got you. And you're
Yeah.
like, you just trust him.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, there's a clear, I think that was an Indiana Jones thing. Like,
Last
there's
Crusade.
actually a clear thing.
He walks out onto
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good one. Did you feel like, if you're being honest with us now, did you feel like there was a place there where you kind of knew deep down, it was like, yeah, the Lord wants me to do this, but it was a period of time before you?
Well, I did think that I had a lot to learn about. I had no idea how to run my own private practice. And so being a part of the two different situations, I learned a ton about that and like even how to set it up and how to go about it and what would
So
be
there was
good.
some good timing on this,
For sure.
what you got to experience
I
first.
do think the
Yeah.
second scenario, if people had made different decisions, you know, there's like the Lord's best, and then there's good.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were some opportunities to make to get into the Lord's best, in terms of that place, and we just chose to go with what was good or whatever,
Gotcha.
and so I could have still been there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
With the Lord's best scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But it became really clear that wasn't going to happen because people have choice.
Sure. Absolutely.
Everybody has choice.
Absolutely.
And so, like, yeah,
Yep.
choices, like, people made choices and it was like, oh, okay, that's fine. Like,
Yep.
no hard feelings, but it's time for me to go.
Yep.
And so the Lord used that to be
Mhm.
like, okay, it's time.
Right.
You know?
Right. We don't have to do it with him.
Right.
You know, we get to, but we don't have to.
Exactly.
He's not going to make us.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So this transition, then how did it, I mean,
Yeah, it was scary, because, you know, the way it works typically in the field is clients get to choose who their therapists are, right?
Mhm.
Places don't tell people who their therapist should be, right? Or, you know,
Mhm.
have to be, I should say. And so I got to present to my clients that I was starting my own practice and that I could help them transition to a therapist here, or I could help you find another therapist outside of here. So it's just like or you could come with me. So that, you know, it's a plethora of options.
Mhm.
And so they get to choose. And I kind of thought, I don't know, I'll probably have like 4 or 5, maybe come with me. And that would be great. That'd be a great little,
your little start?
Yeah.
Mhm.
and I had 20.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
And
I've not
that
heard
was
that. Yeah.
absolutely like a blessing
Wow.
from the Lord. Like
Wow.
he did that. I mean, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was like an even better start, right? Because I got to start not in kind of destitution necessarily, right? Like we got to start like with a good start, and
Cool.
yeah. So
That's really
then I got to figure out how to market and how to, you know, do that.
Mhm.
But what I found is the Lord always, I've trusted the Lord all along to bring who needs to be there.
Mhm.
But there is
Mhm.
wisdom and he can use marketing, right?
Mhm.
To like
Oh,
bring people
same
to the
thing.
right
Yep,
to the right
absolutely.
therapist and whatever.
Absolutely.
And so I did some of that. And then yeah, so one thing I was going to talk about was the cost of therapy, because what I decided to do was not bill insurance.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is, like, there's a lot of reasons for that. The main one is insurances require a diagnosis to reimburse
Mhm.
for your services.
Mhm.
And so everyone, whether you think they have a diagnosis or not, requires
You
one.
have to give them
Mhm.
that.
And, you know, diagnosing is, I do it very carefully and not flippantly.
Right.
Because it can be a label, right? Like that people
Mhm.
carry with them or whatever, and not healthy. And so, anyway, so I love not having to diagnose because I'm not charging
Yeah.
insurance or whatever.
Right. Right.
But it does limit the number of people that would come to you because if people have insurance,
Sure.
they want to use it.
Sure.
So it was a strategic decision to just do like people paying out of pocket.
Mhm.
And so, I think we were talking about this the other day. Like, if as far as like standard in the field, if somebody was like experienced as I am and trained as I am, they could easily charge, I don't know, probably $100 more than I charge.
Okay.
And so I try to make it as humanly,
Right.
as affordable as humanly possible for people, but also be able to, pay our bills.
Well, and I imagine there's actually a lot of people. Well, I mean, I would think many people out there who also don't want to be labeled as some,
Yeah.
like that's in the
For sure.
government sphere somewhere or something,
sure.
Who's just like, I just want to get better and whatever's
Yeah.
happening. And
100%.
I just assume.
Also, it just takes like you gotta set aside a ton of time to like communicate with those companies because a lot of times they'll deny claims
Oh, right,
and
right.
you gotta justify why you're still
Yeah.
working with and so when someone's not using insurance, you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, no, there's changes even in the medical field like that. Like I went to a chiropractor not long ago who's strictly cash.
Yep.
She's like, she has her own practice
Yep.
and she's like, no, I'm not doing
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. The
Yep.
insurance, all that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's worked out. I mean, but you've gotten as
Yeah, the
many as
Lord's
you
blessed it, and that was that. So that was a mental hurdle that I
Mhm.
had, where I was
Mm.
like, are we gonna be able to actually do this
Right.
and charge out of pocket for people because people want to use their insurance,
Sure.
and they should,
Sure.
So yeah, that was I was like, I don't know, we'll see,
Yeah.
but it has not been a huge barrier, so that's good.
Nice.
But yeah, in looking at charging for sessions too, like several times I've been like, man, I could very easily just raise rates and kind of adjust that. And I went into it thinking, okay, I'll start here and then, raise it as we go because you want to, get as many clients as you kind of can when you're starting out. And just haven't felt the freedom from the Lord to do that.
Okay.
Yet. Now that doesn't
Wow.
mean I won't
Right.
ever, right? But like,
Right.
yeah, the Lord's just been like, nope.
Wow. Right.
Nope, because he did tell me, he gave me a word about it's Abundant Life Counseling is the name of my practice.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
generosity
Right. Right.
was one of the words that he
Right.
gave me. And so I supervise new therapists to the field too who are they have to get like 2 years of supervision post master's degree to be a licensed therapist. And so generosity with them as well, because it's pretty expensive. It can be pretty expensive to get all that supervision
Right.
in and all that.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway,
That's awesome. I mean, that's such a kingdom principle, though, right? I mean, you can't outgive God.
yeah.
And so if he's like holding off, like, no, I don't want you to raise
Right.
it, then however he's working that out, is how he's
Like,
working
wouldn't it
that out.
be-
That's so awesome.
Wouldn't it be crazy if
So
I
awesome.
if I like trusted him all the way up till now and then was like, no, I must get what I'm worth, and then
Right.
I change my rates,
Yeah.
and then like all the blessing that he's done up to this point would go
That's a
for
great
nothing.
point. That's a great point.
It's like silly.
See, I love that because if I'm looking out here at our audience and there's entrepreneurs out there, even if they're selling widgets or whatever, it's like, ask the Lord.
Yeah.
What do you, I mean, we can all sit down with we can all sit down with, some kind of finance guy and go, well, I need to make this to make this. And well, on God's economy, you might not, so you can even ask the Lord about that.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
what should I get? What should I charge for my services? What should I,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really awesome. That's super cool. Well, not to give away like any plans or anything, but like, I don't know. I'm just asking you, like, do you see that possibly in the future, as you're asking the Lord, has he said anything to you about expanding your business, of getting other counselors in your business, or,
Yeah.
anything like that?
That's something that I talk to him about frequently, just because, I am, have been up to this point very like entrepreneurially minded, right? Like kind of apostolic, like let's take new ground, let's, and right now I have felt like his answer has been like, not yet, no, because there is like, I think this period of time for whatever reason is very much like just rest in me, and my schedule is such that when I'm on days where I'm doing therapy, there's a lot of it that goes on, but then I try to schedule, I try to do most things in 3 days and then have a couple of days, off there during the week where most people are working. Like today, I'm here because I don't have sessions,
Hey.
but the Lord has said like that's important for me during this time, like for my own mental health, but also for like just like a blessing of time,
That's cool.
you know.
Oh, that's really cool.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to only have my own problems too. You know what
Sure.
I mean? Like
Sure.
when you expand, there's
Oh,
other
but I
things.
think that's the part of living freely and lightly, right? If he's saying no, then we're living freely and lightly in that. And when he's
Absolutely.
ready to say yes,
Yep.
there'll still be a freely and
Right.
lightly in it because he'll give you the right person,
Right.
or he's going to, whatever the situation might be. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the part of trusting. I'm not saying, again, and we probably say this a few times here, is we're not saying again that, you come to Jesus and you'll have no problem in your whole life or
Right.
whatever. But absolutely, he cares about these things. He cares about your practice. He cares about these people who need it, deeply about the people who need
Yeah.
this help. And if as he entrusts you with more, and if it were to expand, it's like that prayer of Jabez kind of thing. If he extends your tent pegs, then he's in it. His right arm is in it,
Yeah.
and his power is in it, and you'll do that freely and lightly. You might run 5 practices and find it easier than what you're doing now.
Right.
Once if God's guiding that out, and we're doing it with
Yeah.
Him.
Yeah. They're just up till now there's not the freedom to go there yet.
I love that.
And I love it too. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, live freely and lightly.
Right.
There you go. I love
Yeah.
That's awesome.
that.
That's awesome.
That's sweet.
For the person who's listening to this, that let's say they're interested in like doing what you're doing. They're interested in like maybe not even being a therapist, but also just like starting a business with Jesus, or doing therapy with Jesus, or whatever they're putting their hand to. They want to do it with Jesus. What would be some key takeaways and encouragement to that person who's sitting there going, dude, I want to do that. I want to experience that. I want to work freely and lightly with Jesus. From your experience, what would you say to that person as some keys and some really practical steps to walk in this?
So I think the first one that comes to mind is we've already said it a little bit. Like, don't rely on your own wisdom and experience and expertise. To make a business plan, to set rates, to hire people. Like, don't do that. Don't do that, because then the business will be on the ground of your own wisdom and experience, and that's, ugh, you know.
That's good.
So trusting your connection with him, your conversation with him about, and him telling you what you should be doing every step of the way, right? From like just researching, and like I did the same thing everybody does. You go online and you look at what are the 12 things to think about when starting your practice, you know? So there's that, but
Thank you,
then
Google. Appreciate you.
yeah. But then it's like, okay, Lord, I submit this to you. Like
Right.
what part of this is important to me?
Mm-hmm.
Like what, use these things to like tell me what you want me to do.
Well, that's good.
It's kind of like you were talking
Yeah.
about, Jamie, like when you're getting ready to preach, you look at all these commentaries,
Mhm.
and then you let the Lord highlight things, or the Spirit to tell you things like this is important or that's important, or even in the midst of preaching, it's like something comes up that you had read in a commentary,
Right.
and you're like, oh, I should share it. I need to share that, even though it's not my notes or whatever.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's
and I think that's important because you're not saying, sometimes in this kind of conversation, it's like a let go, let God, just empty your brain and just do. No, you personally, Jess, are a highly trained person, and the Lord loves to use both. Likes to use our highly trained skills and abilities, and He's just saying, just be open to what I'm doing in the midst of that. So it's not sort of a,
I was thinking about
Yeah.
this too. Like, I
Mhm.
think an indicator that, for me, that I'm moving into relying more on myself or my skills or my abilities is an anxiousness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, not to say that you wouldn't be anxious starting your own your own thing, your own whatever it is, right? But there's like this anxiousness that happens where it's like, oh God, oh, and then I'm like, why am I anxious? Oh, it's because I'm trying to rely on my
Yeah.
own
Yep.
self, because then the onus is on me,
Mhm.
not the Lord,
Yep.
right? And that's why I feel anxious.
Mhm.
Yep.
That might be a great word. That's almost an opposite of the freely and lightly.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm anxious. That's not free and light.
absolutely.
Right.
You know?
So, good question
That's
is,
good.
why am I
That's really
anxious
good.
right now? Like, why am I anxious about this
Yeah.
thing?
That's great.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm trying to like pull myself up by my own bootstraps
Yeah.
and do my own thing.
Yeah.
That's really good. I like that.
Then for the person that's listening and they feel pretty hopeless about mental health, let's say right now they're just like, 'cause I would love for you to pray, over some of these folks. But we've been talking about the healing presence of Jesus And some people may even kind of be like, "Oh, I don't know if he will heal me. Is he good? Is he good? Would he do this thing?" What would you say to that person that's, just struggling with mental health, physical health? It could be anything. And um, as a word of encouragement with regard to Jesus, the healer who sets the captive free.
Yeah. I think our perception of free or healing is not always what his is. You know, um, our perception of healing is like absence of pain. And his perception of healing is freedom in pain.
Say that again.
Wow.
Like the way he sees freedom is, or the way that he sees healing is like being free even though you're in pain.
Mhm.
And so I think we're striving a lot of times to like get to this goal, right? Like this absence of whatever, right? That I mean, you see people
Mhm.
use drugs and all kinds of other things to try to get there. Like, let me just feel less anxious. Let me just not feel depressed. Let me just not feel completely consumed by this terrible stuff that happened to me. But sometimes the Lord's answer is freedom, even though freedom in the midst of that experience.
Mhm.
I think he sees that as healing, right?
Mhm.
So like, if I have a physical ailment, right, like
Mhm.
whatever, and I'm praying to be healed, and praying to be healed, and praying to be healed, and people are praying for me to be healed, and all of that, and it doesn't happen. It's like, well, what is that? What's going on there? I think and here's the deal: he can instantly heal anybody of anything that he wants to. But I think he's after more like the freedom that can come in the midst of that pain, like the spiritual freedom, like the freedom of
Mhm.
just freedom, right?
Right. Do you think I mean, that's kind of what James is speaking into right away early on in that book, where he's talking about these trials that come of many kinds, and to not, not just push them away and disregard them, because they're actually bringing about a process of
Yeah,
coming into maturity.
yeah,
So sometimes the Lord's got us on that path. And Paul experienced that too, right? There was something we don't know necessarily. There's a lot of speculation among theologians, but Paul obviously had something that the
thorn in
Lord
the
just wasn't
yeah,
going to heal him
yeah,
of. And he even says to him basically what you're saying. It's like, but here's what I want you to know: my grace is sufficient for that. And what's beautiful about that, and what I really read into that, is that what he's saying is staying connected to me, being with me, being in relationship with me. That will be grace enough.
Yeah.
yeah,
You're not going to overcome this. Is in this life. This isn't going to happen. And the truth is, we are in this life. I mean, we want heaven. We want nirvana. With non-believers out there, you want nirvana.
yeah,
But in this life, one of Jesus's other promises is, "Let me promise you, you'll have troubles of many kinds,
mm-hmm,
but
Yeah.
don't worry.
yeah,
Don't take heart." That's what he said. And I feel like that's what he's saying to Paul. And that sounds like what
yeah.
on the line of what you're saying right there. Take heart, but I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
That's his main goal. Um,
Hmm.
his main goal isn't for us all to be, walking around completely healed of all of our ailments um, in this life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like allowing him to use those points of pain
Mhm.
to draw closer to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's good.
It's awesome.
She should pray today.
Yeah. Will you
Power
just?
on her even right now.
Yeah. I mean, it feels you can
Feel
in
the
the room. It's
yes.
feeling like
Yeah.
heavy.
Yep.
In a good way.
Yep.
So will you just pray? And I don't want to lead you too much. You just pray as the Lord leads. Just for the listener. Could be the person who's dealing with pain. Could be an entrepreneurial person. Could be somebody that's thinking about being a therapist. Whoever. But just pray as you feel led, and we'll close it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Jesus, we just thank you for your spirit. Spirit, we thank you for being present. Um, yeah, and I just proclaim freedom to any captives that might be listening or watching. Yeah, we just bless listeners right now with freedom and an ability to walk freely and lightly based on being in Christ and being up under you and really close to you and having their heads just kind of laying on your chest. And yeah, so I pray for everybody who's listening, just their journey and what you're taking them on right now. And I bless you with the ability to lean on the Father. And I bless you with the ability to hear from Him and trust that you hear from Him, and to take steps in the direction that He's telling you to take steps in, and to be courageous and fearless and trust Him and know that that it's going to be good. It's not just going to be okay. It's going to be good. It's going to be really good. And I pray against any fear, pray against any condemnation, that that no fear or condemnation would enter into the scenario of the decisions that need to be made and that are in the process of being made. Yeah, so we just thank you, Jesus, and we just give you this time with open hands, and thank you for using it. Pray that you continue to, in Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And yeah, thanks
Amen.
to our awesome guest, Jess Moore. You know her well.
Yeah.
Jess Moore. And also to our producer, Mike Brownfield, who
Yeah, Mike.
killed it
Yeah, Mike.
today. And we had all kinds of crazy technical stuff that he's going to have to deal with. So thanks.
And Jess, this is, shameless plug. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you,
Yeah.
they wanted to be like, they wanted to see what you're doing. Maybe there's people that want to just ask you some questions. They watch this and they're like, I want to ask this girl some questions.
Yeah.
Or receive therapy. How would they get a hold of you?
So probably the best way is through my website. So www.abundantlifecincy.com.
With an I or Y?
A Y.
It's a thing here.
Oh, okay. A Y. A Y.
There you go.
C-I-N-C-Y.
Abundant Life Cincy.
Yeah.
With a Y.
Yeah, and probably if you just Googled like Abundant Life Cincinnati, it would
Go Google
pop
it,
up,
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, because my phone number's on there. They can email me through there.
Awesome.
And yeah.
And just because we're recording this, I feel like we should get this on recording. I've already told you this personally. I think you need to write a book on doing counseling with Jesus. Because literally, as you're talking, I'm like, this is so good. This is so good. Imagine, a world of therapists that are learning how to partner with Jesus. So anyway,
It works.
I'm getting this on record here.
Yeah.
This has been a great idea that the Holy Spirit or Raz
Hey,
will
I have
come
a
up
great
with.
idea for you.
Oh, well, Raz said, so maybe I should.
Hey, Jess, have you ever thought about writing a book with
Says
counseling?
I
It'd be
should.
really
Maybe
good.
I will.
So ridiculous.
sorry, what were you saying, Jamie?
It's so ridiculous. But Jess, thanks for being here.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love you. I love you
Yep.
more.
I do too. He loves you more.
But thanks for being here. Love you.
All right.